Oh, started. Excellent. Hello, welcome back to the Eighth Plot How to Write a Book from Scratch with me, author Drewery. Sorry, I'm looking at this side because I'm just confirming that this is all working and also, yeah, it's fine, good. It's been a while and I apologise for that, but there was a lot of planning that kind of had to go into this one in particular. Um, I had to think this particular planning stage out before I could get some notes down and plan this live for you, because that's the whole point of this particular live stream series I'm doing, where you're watching an author write their book live, and I'm trying to do all aspects of it live. So that means what I plan for the book, you're watching me do live, completely live, and nothing missed, so you can see how I think throughout the whole process. And then therefore you're going to see me type it out live as well. Every paragraph, every sentence, do the editing. You're going to see me do that live. And I guess I'll do trying to find a publisher or an agent for this book as well, and I'll do that live. um, I won't be on camera the whole time waiting for the response from the agent, publisher, but at least I'll run you through live the process of actually, writing a letter and sending it off, and what to expect after that, because I've been through that process too, and hopefully we'll go through the process with this particular book. So today, what is it we're doing? This is what I'm writing for you is a fantasy anthology. The reason why it's an anthology is so that every single book in the series essentially covers like a bunch of different genres and a lot of different like aspects of writing, as many aspects as I can into a big fantasy series. But I'm still going to cover things like, you can see here, sci-fi, western, whatever. What we're doing today is comedy. So I'm going to try and plan out the comedy book in this series, and then it's the romance one, and then it's the final back to a more traditional fantasy sort of genre book, and get that out. So hopefully you'll see a bit about how you can plan out a comedy book, all live, of course, and then when I get to typing it, you'll see a more how you can take what's in your head and turn it into jokes and hopefully be funny. Being funny is quite difficult, so we'll see. Yeah, let's get straight into a couple of things about comedy itself. What does a comedy book really need? Well, it needs to be funny. It needs to be comedic. And that kind of manifests in two ways, broadly speaking. One, characters who are funny, having extremely extreme personality quirks. They're quotable, they're doing crazy things, their personalities and the things they say in dialogue are just hilarious. And sometimes that's usually put across with other crazy individuals in the rest of the cast, or serious characters that really highlight their comedic aspect. And the other one, so one is characters who are funny, who say and do funny things, like real people. And then other thing is like funny situations. So like you could have let's say normal people going through the motions of like a really extreme sort of like situation that they've got to get from here to there, and it's impossible. How do they do it? And they do all kinds of crazy different things to make it kind of like there's as an old film I was thinking of just now called Rat Race, where a bunch of people were told if you can get to here you get a £10 million, whatever it was, and they're all different characters. They've all got their own situations. One's a family, one's just this single reasonably rich guy, one's just this crazy Rowan Atkinson character, basically Mr. Bean. And so they're all competing in their own ways, and they've all got their different starting points, and some of them are really into it, some of them aren't, and it's all being gambled on by this incredibly like wealthy elite group. So it's a funny situation that in a way the characters aren't, they are funny, but they're not funny because they're like quotable and they tell jokes and they've got extreme personality quirks. They're just, it's their own normality, like normal human characteristics in crazy situations brought about by the premise, and that's why Rat Race is kind of a good comedy show, a comedy film in that case. So that, like, those are the two, broad speaking. You either have your funny situations that normal-ish characters, shall we say, go through, and then you have your book, which is just about funny characters, and sometimes blend those two things together. So one thing you should also do in comedy is always punch up. Now, what does that mean? And obviously not down. It's not really like, obviously there are people in the world who would laugh when marginalized people, oppressed people, people with like disabilities, people who are going through something, like someone who's depressed, someone who's bereavement, you're not really expected to punch down with your jokes, because jokes kind of are at some people's expense. Instead, you punch up. You go against the people who are evil. Who cares if you punch up to them? They deserve it. And it's also that you're trying to almost critique those groups of people, so it's fine. And so that's why rich people are the butt of quite a lot of jokes nowadays. Corrupt cops are the butt of many jokes. Nazis, extremely religious, like fundamentalist, stupid religious sort of takes on different faiths. They're the people you can punch up at. And sometimes that also manifests as, say, the boss in an office kind of sitcom, for example. The boss is always, you can punch up to them because they're the ones in the positions of power to make things better, so they can be the target. Now it's not, like I said, to some people it is funny to punch down, but it should all try and punch up, or at least sideways if you can't manage punching up, but you should be able to. So punch up, not down, with your comedy. For one thing, it's a bit more righteous to do so. The other thing is that people don't respond to punching down humor. Like you feel awkward when you're punching down on people who don't deserve to be the butt of a joke. Now, another thing is empathy. Now, empathy works alongside comedy because you're actually supposed to feel something for your characters. Say if they're like, people laugh when a character is in an awkward situation. I watched a film the other day called Deep Cover, and all the humor is, not all of it, but most of it is generated from this awkwardness. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's about three, I say actors. One's definitely an actor, one's a would-be actor, and one's someone who wants more confidence. So they all do this, what do you call it? Improv sessions. And then they're hired by policemen to improv, like going for, like, what's it called, counterfeit cigarettes and drugs. And because they're reasonably good at improv, they actually work their way in. But it's all about a lot of awkwardness because of the way, like, one of them is like a guy who wants to be this really method actor, and it's so awkward to watch him. It's played by Orlando Bloom. It's really funny, and he's trying desperately to be this like serious actor, and it's not working, and it's awkward because he says the wrong things. Another one is this very like super not confident kind of guy, and so everything he's saying doesn't land. It doesn't feel like improv. It doesn't feel like a normal person. You're cringing a little bit, but it's funny at the same time. And then you've got Bryce Dallas Howard character just trying to keep it all together. So that's comedy. That's awkward, but it draws upon your empathy. Like you feel, this is so awkward, but it's so funny, and I can't stop watching, and it connects you to them because you can kind of see the characters, feeling the awkwardness as well. So you're empathizing with them, and you're laughing at their antics, and you kind of understand where they're coming from. You're understanding why they're acting the way they are, and you understand why they adapt, and you kind of need to feel for them. Because the truth is, when we laugh at things that are humorous in our own day-to-day lives, we have a connection to the human beings who are who are going through something funny. When an observational humor, like a comic who's like observational humor, when they point out something, we laugh because we've experienced it too. So empathy is very important in comedy. If possible, be meaningful. Where you emphasize, or to be meaningfully comedic, you have to emphasize story. Like the story can't just be a vessel for jokes. The jokes have to weave their way into the narrative that's happening and be a part of it. So one of my favorite comedic books is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, for example. I would say that the story is a vessel. No, I'd say that the jokes inform the story. So a lot of the humor is derived from these reading these little extracts from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy itself, which is a humorously written book. So every time you read one of these, it's telling you a bit more about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and how that wisdom should be applied to what comes next. In the Discworld books, I think it's this is even stronger than this is what I think it's even stronger than Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy, is that the jokes are really like are weaved incredibly well into the narrative and move it forward. And it's always a mixture of great dialogue and characterizations and descriptions, and sometimes hilarious settings. But the comedy is working with the narrative and even with like the themes of each book, and that's why they're comedic genius. You should probably also set up a character. Like characters, they need to be comedic. They need, or yeah, well, need to be comedic, or in other words, the humor that they do flows naturally from who they are. For example, a stupid character, like let's say Fry in Futurama, great character, love him, but he's not coming out witty repartee in his speech. He's a kind of a stupid dummy guy, which is, and we love him for it. And his humor is derived from his stupidity, not from being able to like come back with a great response. Meanwhile, Leela, another character in Futurama, she's a bit of a neurotic character, I think, but highly competent at lots of different things. So the humor is sort of derived from her awkwardness. And meanwhile, Bender, the robot, he's like a rogue in D&D, I suppose. He's doing his own thing. He doesn't care about any of the social norms and rules, and that's why it's funny. But he's not. None of these three are doing any. They're not doing comedy that doesn't match their character. So I'll go back to Hitchhiker's Guide again. So the comedy that Arthur Dent brings is that he's the most normal, bog standard, common human you've ever met, and he's in this weird world, and it's how he reacts to it. But he's got a bit of wit, and it fits. Zaphod Beetlebrox, who's another character, he's a bit like Bender. He's like he plays by his own rules. He's so incredibly narcissistic, and he's never doing any humor. He's never being an idiot, and he's not doing stupid things. He's in perhaps stupid situations and bizarre situations, but he reacts to them like a cool guy, because that's who he is. And then you've got Marvin, the paranoid robot, who's an incredibly depressed, incredibly intelligent character who has to obey these like humans and aliens, and he's never doing anything disgusting to get a laugh. He's never telling a joke. He's just saying things that, from his character, are incredibly hilarious. So your character needs to be comedic. I'll put there again logically. Logically. In other words, it needs to make sense why they do and say this thing that's funny. Like, it's funny to have a really prim and proper kind of individual character constantly be mocked and put in an awkward situation. It's funny because they're fish out of water, but they never respond to that by being equally, like, they don't change everything about them. It's funny because they're this prim and proper bloke doing something extraordinarily crazy while still being a prim and proper bloke. What else? obviously think about your audience. Obviously, different comedy for children, different comedy for adults. Like young children, they like a fart joke, like burps. They like disgusting things. But I've observed, having like read some books in front of children before in different like libraries and schools, that that stuff is funny because it's kind of taboo, because it's disgusting. But it goes very quickly. It becomes not something they care about. Like almost when you have those kind of more disgusting jokes or things that are playing to disgust, even someone falling over, someone getting hit in the face, like the sort of Looney Tunes kind of comedy as well. It gets cut off very quickly as comedy. Like children age out of it almost within a couple of years, and that's why disgusting humor in some like modern day films don't land and actually kind of ruin the film because they're not they shouldn't be there for that audience. Like children find fart burps like vomiting or like tripping up and other like boogers and stuff, earwax, whatever. They all love it because it's kind of taboo. But when you age up past a certain point, those things are as disgusting as they should be treated. They're no longer funny. It's no longer humorous, and it's like you've probably all had a friend, or you've known someone who giggles still at a fart, and you all look down and say, and the person is embarrassed, or worse, keeps playing into it because they thought, oh, they didn't hear it. Let's do it again, and it's sort of, you get out of that kind of humor. But that's like the humor for children. Teenagers seem to prefer jokes that like resonate them and their experiences as a teenager. And teenagers can be very perceptive to the sort of more adult humor, and they're always actually like looking to emulate it. So you kind of have to be careful about what kind of humor you're putting into your books that teenagers are going to be quickly emulating. But they can be really smart and get the adult jokes, but they think some of the childish stuff goes out the window very quickly for teenagers. Adults look for novelty and new jokes, and comedy waxes and wanes, doesn't it, across the world. You've definitely got some people who are like dark humor, others that definitely don't and are totally against it. Observational humor is obviously very sort of in, but I mean, I was going to say, like, some people think that comedy is dead nowadays because of some and they always blame something like wokeness, for example. But it's not. It's not really. You'll be surprised how many woke people are pushing the edges of comedy as far as they go, and they're not considered like, and that's not a cancel culture. It's not about to fall on them. It's like people who say you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. Why not? Blazing Saddles is completely ridiculing racism, and why can't you make that today? And okay, some of the jokes are going to have to be taken out for sure, but for the most part, it like Blazing Saddles is critiquing and punching up at racism. It's mocking everyone who engages with it. The smart people are the non-racists in that film. So why couldn't you make it today? Like, obviously some jokes are going to go, but it's punching up, not down, and it's mocking the historical institution of racism and belittling it and making sure that the audience knows whoever's a part of it is a loser. It's like how what's the other one? Tropical Thunder is the other one where people say you couldn't make that now, but it's a film that's punching up against crazy movie executives and actors who go far too method. Obviously, some things have to change today. I would never say that it can be completely remade, but the central premise is again something that we would go, yeah, I'm glad they're still taking the mick out of whatever Tropic Thunder is about, because it's still happening today. There's people still trying to be far too method, and like this almost some you can critique the filmmaking industry a lot these days. So there's humor is it's on like a knife edge, isn't it? You can and you're kind of tailoring it for an audience, and not every joke lands with every group. You can never have a comedy that's all encompassing for everyone to enjoy. I mean, humor is universal. Every human being engages in something that's humorous, and they find something humorous no matter what their cultural background. But you know, I think if you're going to write comedy as well, you have to expect it to land with a certain group of people. You have to be careful with it, but you'll be surprised what lands. And you've got to don't ever think that you're funny now. You gotta go out there, read a bunch of books that are comedic in their own way, and draw as much as you can from what they're getting right. And comedy can be hard. It doesn't always land. You've got to tailor it to a particular group in your mind. This fantasy series, I want it to be able to be read by children, but it's certainly aimed a bit higher. So the comedy in it, well, it's what I'm going to tell you this now. I'm aiming for a more Discworld kind of feel to the comedy. That's what I'm aiming for, because that's one of my favorite comedic inspirations in writing, and that's where I'm going to have to. And now I'm going to have to kind of understand that what I'm writing is cutting out a certain audience for the book. But that's a sacrifice you make. What's the seventh one? Comedy is like horror, and this might be surprising, but it is. Horror sets up a situation that is actually kind of normal, and then subverts it with fear. That's what horror does. So, for example, what's fun? I was about to say like a clown, but that's not, like a clown was something that was kind of normal. Like clowns existed in our culture, and then people realized, it'd be awful if clowns were the horrific plot device in this particular story, and because of that, it's now entered the zeitgeist of our civilization that clowns are creepy. It's incredibly difficult to get away with, but it was probably something that was normalized in society. Hey, you got a clown, it's all so funny, but then someone took the clown and made it horrific, and now it's an aspect of horror culture in a way, and it's almost normality subverted with fear. You turn the thing that's normal and you make it, like, even just being in your house can become fearful if it's dark and there's lightning and there's a knock at the door and you open it and there's no one there. You close it, there's another knock, and then there's a knock at the window. What is going on? And it's a normal situation of being at home. Now it's something to be afraid of. It's like like going out like into nature is normal, but you can turn it very easily to a horror. You subvert the normality with something that makes it horrible, or is horrible, and is horrifying. That's why, like, comedy is like it, but it's different. Comedy takes a normal situation and subverts it with strange comedic setting and laughter. So I'm going to go back to that example of Rat Race, for example. In Rat Race, there's a guy, one of the people who's trying to get that 10 million and get to this place and win the prize, finds someone who, like an ambulance guy who's kind of lonely, and says, I'll travel with you. They're going in the right direction. So that's kind of a normal situation. It's a bit out there, but it's just a ride share. But it's an ambulance, and in the back is this, spoilers, is a heart in an icebox. And then from that, and like, it's a normal situation, but the writer's gone, well, wouldn't it be funny if they open the box mid-journey, go over a hump, and then the heart bounces out? And these two are now in this extraordinary situation where they're trying to clean the heart off, put it back in the ice, and hope everything goes okay with the surgery. And it snowballs, and it's hilarious in its own way. But it's like a normal-ish situation. The setup is there, and you could easily make that horrifying. Like, the ambulance driver realizes the heart's gone, turns to the person he's hitchhiking with, no, the hitchhiker he picked up with takes his heart, and now it's a chase between the hitchhiker who's trying to get away from this crazy ambulance driver, and it's like one is comedy, one is horror, and they kind of they begin the same, and it's all about you figuring out how to subvert both of them. What I want to talk about now is some examples of comedy writing I enjoy, and in a way I kind of want to replicate some of that in here. I'm already doing the Discworld, that's the one I'm going to do, but let's talk about some examples of comedic writing that you're probably aware of, or because comedy manifests in writing in different ways. So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the first one I'm going to deal with, because this derives its humour from the bizarre situations, the alien situations the main characters find themselves in. The writer has gone, I'm in a big old universe, I can do whatever I want. So here's they all get suddenly sent forward to a restaurant at the end of the universe, where a restaurant was built to watch the universe get destroyed over and over and over again. Or since the probability, if you can figure out the probability of something, you can make it happen. So why don't you build a spaceship that works on that probability drive? So if you want to get from point A to point B, if you can work out the chances of immediately going from here to there, you can. That's how you travel faster than light. But it's bizarre and it's strange. And it talks about aliens who have like 100 arms. So of course they invented deodorant before they invented the wheel. A funny joke, but it's just mad. The whole thing is mad. The character is going through the entire story dressed in their pink dressing gown, because they got the story started with them needing to leave Earth right in the morning. And there's also how it's the bizarre set pieces are also juxtaposed against fairly normal ones. So Arthur Dent, the main character, has to at the very beginning of the book, his house is going to be knocked down to make way for a bypass around a village, and he deals with all that nonsense. And then he hitchhikes with his friend Ford Prefect, and at the same time as that's happening, the Earth is being demolished to make way for a hyperspace bypass, and then it's all like bizarre because it turned out they didn't need to make the bypass at all. So there's wonderful descriptions of different people, some like really like strange like sidetracks which are funny. Like one of the characters is apparently descended from Genghis Khan, and he keeps having visions of like Mongolians shouting at him, and he doesn't understand why, and he doesn't understand why his wife wants hanging baskets out the front of their house, but he wants axes out the front of his house. And it's weirdness, but it's funny once you read it. I'm not describing it perfectly well, but I can promise you it's hilarious. It's one of the funniest well-known books of all time. And by the way, humor is very good for writing. Let's say you're writing a purely comedic book. Your reader will stick with it if the jokes are landing, because when you hear a good joke, you want to hear it more. Laughter is like, it's a drug for your mind. Your brain literally releases this drug into your body. You like that, do you? Try and find some more, which is why we keep going after humor. So when you put humor into a book, it's a nice way to hook your reader and get them reading more. Like one of the lines that kept me reading Hitchhiker's, there's lots, but one of the lines that did is like, the spaceships hung in the sky in much the same way that bricks don't. And again, I probably didn't make you laugh at that point, but I laughed at the absurdity of it, but also a truthful comparison. The humor is derived with the strange description and the absurdity of it all. And the characters are definitely extreme versions of people. Zaphod Beeperworks is kind of like the most narcissistic person you've ever met, but in a way that endears you to him, because you think, how can this person be so narcissistic? But then kind of prove that they're right as well. Like he says once, if there's anything more important than my ego around, I want it caught and shot. And kind of a cool line, I thought, when I first read it. And as narcissistic as it is, and as much as narcissism is like not an attractive trait in people, it's funny in the Hitchhiker's Guide to me. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not The Hitchhiker's Guide to Me, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But this was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was not great when it was translated to film writing, screenplay, and that's because one thing about a humorous book is that it perhaps doesn't. If you're hoping to translate it to other mediums like theatre or film, TV, it's not always going to work because like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is funny a lot of the times because of the descriptions. You can't stop a film and describe things and expect them to be funny. You need to show, not tell. Especially in obviously you show, not tell in books, but a film is about showing you the humor, not stopping and telling you the joke. The action tells you the joke. So The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy's only sort of flaw in its comedy, it doesn't transfer well to other mediums, if you ask me. That's my opinion. So The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is very bizarre, and that's where it finds its humor. It can do. The writer could do anything. That was Douglas Adams, by the way. So get onto the Discworld. Discworld is my favourite humorous book series. I think it's the one I'd want to keep if the rest of my bookshelf needed to be taken away and all I could have was one series of books. I would have the Discworld series. And the humour in a Discworld is excellent descriptions of character. It fleshes these characters out by describing them in a hilarious way. Like Captain Carrot is described. He's named Carrot not because he's got red hair, but because he is incredibly muscular, and a muscular person has this carrot-like shape. Gives you a titter when you read it, and it's like a comedic description that fleshes him out as well. And you even fill in the gaps there with the humorous description. And when Carrot is first described in Guards, the humor is very well woven into the narrative. It's sometimes it's very subtle. Like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Discworld, it's always going to be Discworld for me. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is brilliant, but Discworld just does it so much better. It weaves the humor in so much better, and it doesn't feel like it's wasted. It's not a joke that's just been inserted by Terry Pratchett at the time to just make you laugh for the sake of laughter. It's there to inform the story. There's a bit of absurdity because it is a fantasy universe, but it's also sticking to the rules because it's also a critique of narrative in and of itself. I think that Discworld, though, gets a lot of its humour from absurd situations. So, or taking something that's normal in fiction and subverting it. For example, in the book Mort, I think it's the fourth book, I think it is, Death is personified as the Grim Reaper, as he traditionally is in our mythology, and he decides that he wants an apprentice because he wants to take a break from his life as Death. He, like Pratchett, must have wondered, what if Death was bored of his job or didn't like the fact that he was considered the villain? So, fun premise to start with, and so Death goes and recruits Mort, who's a bit ignorant of the world, he's very young, and he doesn't get why death is a natural part of life as it is presented in the Discworld. And he's driven by emotion rather than logic. Like, one of the things that Terry Pratchett says about Death, he's not evil, he's just terribly, terribly good at his job. And he doesn't understand the necessity of death. And it's humorous to watch Death kind of, well, you just do my job. I'm going to go and try all these things because I want to know what humanity's all about. And so it's a subversion of a classic sort of mythological premise in our sort of wider culture. And then it gets even weirder as Mort screws up being Deaf and makes things like the very fabric of reality start to break down. But it's just such a great subversion of sort of normality, of a normal mythological idea, and that's where a lot of Discworld draws its humour from. It's about taking what you already know about narratives and subverting them, and then the absurd situations that come from it. Like, if you're Death's apprentice or stand-in and you're told, go take the life of this person, and you're like, well, I'm not the Grim Reaper, I don't know if I'm up for this. and then it all starts to go wrong when a person doesn't die when they're supposed to. So that's how the Discworld humour works. Skullduggery Pleasant is another. I find it very humorous. It's probably a book which I would say is half meant to be humorous and half meant to be serious, and it works because most of the jokes don't come from descriptions of people. People are actually described quite normally, because it's kind of serious horror as well. But the humor is derived not from like descriptions or absurd situations, but good dialogue, conversations, and quipping at in various situations. And that's so the humor is almost all derived from the way the characters talk, which isn't perhaps how normal. Okay, it's not. It's not how normal people talk. Most of the characters are very rude to one another, and they're very truthful with each other. That they'll be very clear who they hate and dislike and what they really think. And it's humorous when they start telling people in their dialogue, but it only comes from dialogue. The humor is only in the way that people speak. It all feels natural for those characters as you learn about those characters throughout the story, but it's really only coming from dialogue, and that's fine. You don't, but I think it works in Skullduggery Pleasant because you understand why these characters are the way they are. Most of them are like hundreds of years old. That's going to change the way you think and about the world and how you engage in it, and why people are actually quite honest and truthful in many respects. But you can also see how younger people who will be centuries old at some point, they still have to learn how to be this kind of person. They have to like think, I'm going to live for centuries. I'm going to put aside that way I used to talk, and I'm going to start talking like this, and it's going to be funny and humorous. But it's not coming. It's solely dialogue. So you can push all your comedy through dialogue if you want to have serious plot points and narratives along with some humor that definitely hooks and keeps your reader wanting more and keeps reading for that extra little bit of humor come from a dialogue from certain dialogue. Now, Jack Reacher is not a humorous book, but I'm mentioning it now because the occasional humor that is weaved in, and it gets weaved in a certain way. I think it only really, I know it's coming from dialogue and description in Jack Reacher, but it's very, very, very sparse. Now, Jack Reacher is not a humorous book series. The reason why I read Jack Reacher is for the way Lee Child and now Andrew Child describe certain, like the way people act and behave and what they're thinking, and it feels like very observational. It feels like this is someone who paid attention to not only how they think, but how other people seem to be thinking when they do certain things. But if you're writing a serious book, it might be worth throwing in some humor, like Jack Reacher, like Lee Child does in Jack Reacher, because it's not there to be cathartic and to like to cause a moment of levity. It's just there because it feels natural that the POV voice would say it. So I'll give you this. There's a Jack Reacher book called The Affair, and I think this is the first time I really laughed out loud when reading a Jack Reacher book. Even though he said some funny, like Jack Reacher character himself says some funny things and does some humorous things as well. So the way I'm going to describe it now, and it's not going to be funny to you, but either way, let's give it a go. A classic situation in a Jack Reacher book that he's always accosted by some people these hard guys who want to take him down for whatever reason, and they're not really the main bad guys in most times. But two hard guys approach Reacher, and he ignores them the first time. Even like one of them is trying to do all the talking. He thinks Reacher is someone else, and he's trying to like badmouth him. He's trying to put him down. He's trying to assert some sort of stupid alpha male dominance, and they're kind of portrayed as unsophisticated morons. And that's not what's funny about them. Who they are isn't funny. It comes across as tense and like, oh, it's going to be a fight. And who are these people? Could they actually be a threat to Reacher? That sometimes happens. But we are encouraged to think that while this altercation between Reacher and them, while not turning violent, Reacher kind of ignores them, thinks nothing of them, and moves on, and they kind of like they lose the high ground, so to speak, so they kind of let it go. But you get the sense that later on Reacher's going to have to beat these people up. But what made me laugh was this little bit later when they meet again, and like the person who did all the talking is like having another go at Reacher like that, and then you hear you get this thought in Reacher's head as he's analysing the situation, and he's sort of like going, right, when I smash these two people's face in, I'm gonna hit that guy first because he's doing all the talking, therefore he's the leader of this group, unless the other guy is some kind of silent mastermind. I read it. Trust me, it was funny for me because of everything else you read up to that point. But it's this idea that Reacher, he made this joke in his own head. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't find it funny. But everything about it informed me a bit more about Reacher himself. It seemed totally natural. And when I read it, I laughed at how funny it was to call this like unsophisticated moron the silent mastermind, like because Reacher meets silent masterminds in other parts of the book series, and that comedy couldn't exist without everything else in the book. And maybe that the Affair book is quite deep into the series, so what I'm trying to get at is that humor in your books, you'll think this is the moment for a great joke, and don't try and be funny for the sake of being funny. I think people can spot that when they read it. What I just talked about was a joke that came out of nowhere but worked completely and utterly, and it wasn't really for the sake of humor. It made sense for Reacher to analyze things that way, and it made the fight he got into all the more fun. It's just never be afraid to throw comedy into a book that's not comedic, but do it right. Make sure what I'm trying to say, because it's something I experienced with my own writing, when you're writing something that should be taken seriously or isn't supposed to be outrageously humorous or even vaguely humorous, even if you want to throw a joke in that you'd realize would be very funny right there and make sense, it still has to work within the wider narrative. It has to be something that character would say. Like, even if you're going to this is what I'm trying to say, if you're going to throw even a little bit of humor into your book, make sure what you throw it in is still blends seamlessly in with everything that's going on around it. And finally, I was going to talk. No, not finally. Second to last, I think. Asterix and Obelisks. Obviously, it's got its problems as a book because of some drawing styles in it. You know what those are. I'm not going to go for it here, but I'm going to say something about it because it was when I was younger and I couldn't understand all the little nitty gritty bits. It's the kind of humor that it's really smart humor, even for children. I never got the joke instant mix for one of the characters was called Instant Mix, and I didn't get it till later. And I thought, instant, it's so, and I loved it even more. In some ways, that humor becomes a bit timeless. It's like an example of. Oh, now I realise the reason why I'm talking about Asterix properly is that Asterix is an example of children's humour, but something for adults as well. So if you're going to write childish, if you're going to write books for children, not childish books, you could try and squeeze in humour that an adult will get later, and it kind of sends your old readership back to your book. I still sometimes pick up an Asterix books and read it because they were funny, and they still kind of are funny. There's obviously some things wrong with them, but you can kind of work through that once you know what you're looking at and critique it properly. But I'm throwing in Aladdin as an example of how you write two layers together. Children probably don't miss all the adult jokes, but adults will see them later. And what's better is a childish reader will pick it up again and get even more from it the second time. That's only a quick thing about Asterix. And then there's Roald Dahl. Again, you have to take some of his books differently nowadays with the way we, because society has changed. It wasn't good in the past. It's definitely not good now. But like, it was humor that took the mick out of strange-looking people, and that's kind of an example of punching down. Like, if you want to get an idea of what punching down might be, read a Roald Dahl book occasionally. But it's still funny, and I think it came out of absurd situations. It's funny that, like, Harry Potter got compared to Roald Dahl an awful lot in terms of style, but Roald Dahl, like, Harry Potter's sort of aged like milk, while Roald Dahl still gets away with it sometimes, or people forgive Roald Dahl more than they obviously forgive J.K. Rowling. But there is some humour. It's possible to learn humour from Roald Dahl, and I think it comes from. It's the fact that it's the cathartic nature of seeing terrible characters meet their end in hilarious ways. Miss Trunstable being like driven mad by Matilda using her powers. All the kids in Roald Dahl, it's funny to watch them being destroyed by their own hubris in their own entitlement, emphasized by what they just take from the chocolate factory itself, what they try to take advantage of. I can't really say much more. Roald Dahl is just one of those things that was humorous to me. Maybe I've got to go back to that. I'm going to go break apart now to something to Futurama. And the reason why I mentioned Futurama is a great example of comedy following rules. Like, I've already touched upon this a little bit more. Fry is a dummy and an idiot, and that's where his humour is derived from. We laugh at him being an idiot. Lida is a bit neurotic, and we laugh at her because she embarrasses herself and doesn't quite fit in, and we laugh at her for the awkwardness she gets in. And Bender is an amoral robot, and therefore he does the dark humour. It breaks all the norms, and we can find that funny. However, there's more to this. So there's, in a sense, there's some rules. If he's an idiot, he has to be funny this way. If Leela is like this, she has to be funny this way. And if Bender is like this, he has to be funny this way. And sometimes they break out of it. Sometimes Bender seems to be acting adorable, and it sometimes doesn't feel like it quite works and isn't as funny as all the dark humour he does. But it's almost a rules. But you can add another layer of rules which maintain the humour and maintains the character. Fry, for example, is a dummy, and he's always saying and doing stupid things. But there are a lot of times when he's incredibly capable and when he's driven to be. Like, he's this complete idiot, but then you watch him fly a spaceship by himself with ropes and pulleys attached to the steering wheel while Leela is blind. And he's shooting these guns, and it's working. And it's it works with the character because he's got this love of sci-fi, and he's moving his love of sci-fi to this universe that actually it works because it's almost exactly what you would expect from a sci-fi universe. So it's like another layer of his personality that, although he's dumb and stupid, being highly capable at some things just works and it makes sense. And Leela, while being a bit neurotic and a bit awkward, she's incredibly brutal and violent. That's another layer to her character, and it's still funny, and it doesn't ruin everything that came before. And now I realise Bender is very emotional. That's that adorable sort of side. He can't like that. He does that when he's a robot. It doesn't always work. And he connects to things in very strange ways. Like, he finds some things cute, and he may be amoral, but he's got some other morality that informs his opinion. And some of it's coming from his robotic attitude, and some of it's coming from the fact that he's the completely wild character as well. But it works. It's not jarring to see this character be like that. and it's like some rules for their comedy, and it boxes these characters in, but it allows quite a lot of leeway within them, and it's also it's very strange that these three characters work so well together. You watch them on their own, doing part of their adventures on their own, it's hilarious. You watch two of them, any two, Leela and Bender, Fry and Leela, Fry and Bender, doesn't matter. It works as a partnership. And then when they're a trio, it it's fully expressed and it's hilarious. And it might be a rule of three. It might be that the magic of the number three just works in storytelling. So think if you're going to have comedic main characters, they should probably all work on their own, have them be funny on their own, have them be funny together, and have them be funny when they're in a trio. There's another example of this. The Umbrella Academy. One of the things I thought about was genius about the writing and acting of the Umbrella Academy. You've got 7 dysfunctional... Is it 7? 6 or 7? I think it's 6 or 7. Okay, whatever. I'm going to go with 7. I'm not going to bother counting. There's 7 characters. You watch them on their own. They have a compelling narrative. When they're partnered with each other, they're funnier, and they play off each other very well. And it works in the trios, quad when they're in 4s, and when they're in 5s, when they're in 6s, and when they're in 7s. There's a genius there where every character works on their own, and they work with every other character and every other combination of character. So what I'm getting at with this and the Futurama thing, you don't want to have a set of characters who don't work well together in any situation. I'm not saying they all have to be kind of friends and get on, but it's like they still work. They have enough overlap, like they Venn diagram enough for like to still be sellable to the audience when they're together like that. Just something I noticed about Futurama and the Umbrella Academy. Okay, let's get into this now. I'm going for a Discworld sort of look, and I'm going to rush. Oh man, I've been talking for far too long. I haven't planned anything yet. I hope you've enjoyed this lecture on comedic writing. Don't forget, go to other places on YouTube and get their advice too. Now, in this entire anthology, whatever, it's all about, there is the theme of it's the little things. So my point here is that if you want to defeat the Sauron character, the Voldemort character, the White Witch character, it's not always necessary just to go straight for them and destroy them. If you fix a load of problems in a society, you don't usually have much of a problem. Like, who's Voldemort got to help him try and take over the Ministry of Magic when you've eliminated the racism of the purebloods and stopped the Ministry of Magic from being a neoliberal, loving the nobility, loving the rich people, sometimes throwing some meat to the poorer parts of society? Like, it just fix the ministry, fix the racism, fix the prejudice between the different species, and Voldemort's got no power. It's like that. And in this book, I'm trying to tackle that by writing an almost Lord of the Rings-esque kind of thing, kind of storyline, narrative. But the Dark Lord is completely like laid low, not by the adventurers going and taking him out in a big, there will be a big climatic battle, but he's been substantially weakened by fixing the problems that already exist. In a way, in most cases, Dark Lords, for example, in fantasy fiction, can only do what they do because of a destabilized kind of situation. And that destabilization, is only there because people have let things go lax, or they're quite prepared for a terrible leader to be in charge, like in Lord of the Rings, Denethor. Why is Gondor letting this clear lunatic run Gondor? They should have changed him over ages ago, and everything would be so much better. and that's the theme. It's the little things, and I have to weave this into this comedy aspect. It needs to be something the comedy is dealing with, and because I'm aiming for a Discworld, the humor has to come out from, it has to inform the characters and that plot and that theme. Now, it's been ages since I've done one of these live streams. I'm sorry about that. I apologize again, because I've been trying to think about what the humorous aspect is. So what I've done is I'm going to punch up the chosen hero, because it's kind of what's expected in fantasy books, that the hero is prophesized to be the hero. I'm going to kind of attack that a little bit. I actually kind of like it when it's done well. I mean, Game of Thrones, for example, mocks it in a way. Discworld books definitely do. They slightly differently to how I'm going to do it, obviously, because I don't want to plagiarize. But it can work, and we actually quite like hearing it, especially if the path to being the chosen person is actually quite broad, and it could have been a lot of people, but also the chosen hero is like, I'm not doing this alone. I may be the person who's going to do this, but where are all these other people helping me? Oh, they were by my side the whole time. And it kind of presents the chosen one narrative in its proper context. That, like, in some ways, there will be one person who defeats the evil person in the end, who gets that sword strike in, or the kamehameha, whatever. But you can't say that wasn't built on the actions of hundreds of people as well, getting that hero there. So the chosen hero thing isn't necessarily bad, but I'm going to use it here because it's not something that's appeared in the previous books. There's no hint in this book that there is a chosen hero, but I'm going to use the idea of it to build upon the theme and do some humor along the way. It's also because this book, the theme is trying to get you, if you're the reader of it, they're trying to get you to go, I can't wait for the chosen hero. I got to do my part. And in some ways, you never know who the chosen hero is until they finally they defeat the villain. So a big part of why I'm writing this is that the theme has to kind of inform the real world, and you're kind of reading this and going, there's no sense. The chosen hero isn't a part of how we defeat the fascism that's in our society nowadays. All of us just have to start making the decisions that curtail and kneecap their power. So, our society right now kind of wants a chosen one, don't we? We kind of want that person to come through and be so good at oratory that they can convince America to give up on Donald Trump, or so good at speaking and so charismatic that they can make the case for taxing the rich, universal basic income, proportional representation, better healthcare, better human rights, all those things. And we're waiting for them instead of going, oh wait, why don't I just do something? Not be the chosen one, just, I'm going to stop voting for them, I'm going to vote for them. Rather than giving into the lethargy, rather than being lazy, just make the small changes that change the world. But we're still waiting for a chosen one, and we're always getting let down by the ones who we think is the next chosen one and the next chosen one. Now, I'm a Christian, and you might think I'd be all over the chosen one narrative, but not really, because what I believe what Jesus did is not a sort of chosen one narrative in itself. So it is actually something I can criticize. And why I said that is that you might like the chosen narrative and you kind of want people to start looking for a chosen one and supporting them, pushing them forward. But I'm going against that in this book. I'm trying to get people who read it to go, I've got to start doing the little things as well that take away the power of the dictator. It can be comforting. I do like a chosen one narrative sometimes. I never say never write a chosen one narrative again, but every so often we need a book that does things differently. And so what's going to happen is this is what I've come up with. There's going to be some sort of being, Okay, traveling across Snakar. That's the in case you don't know, the wow, this is I drew this ages ago. The giant snail upon which everything rests. The whole world is on the snail shell. Okay, and this being, I don't know. I feel that it should be like not anyone who. I mean, it could be like a human, an orc, whatever, who has this magical power. But I'm thinking it should be like an other kind of creature, like almost like angelic in some sense, like an angel in some sense, maybe. But either way, what this thing is doing, he's going to different places and he's replicating well-known chosen one narratives. So, Sword in Stone, like a prophecy. What am I doing? 2Ps. Prophecy. Let's see. You've got Sword in the Stone, prophecy. What other ways are people like? Let's say a strange birthmark. That kind of. That sometimes counts you out. The visit from deity. I'll put. And what's another one? I need one more. Oh, yes, that's one. Lineage. In other words, only the person from this particular bloodline must be able to do it. So what this being is doing, they've seen that... Oh, by the way, there is a Sauron Voldemort-like character who's just called Bob for the time being. I'm going to come up with a proper name later, so it needs a bit more time. So Bob is rising at this point in the story. People are trying to get understanding that he's there. And he's out there in the world. And so this being is like, we're going to stop him. And so this being starts thinking, I'm going to make the hero for him. And this is a bad thing to do, because it's working against the theme. What matters is the little things. So I'm going to go through these one by one, because this is what I've come up with. So first there's the Sword in the Stone, or the Lady in the Lake. Okay, the Chosen One is a capable leader. He's young. He, and could be any. I keep saying he. Sorry about that. But he or she. They've already got some things going for them, and they're chosen by this clear, like, that everyone knows they are the chosen one. And they've got to rally behind. Like, it's all about like giving up your own sort of conflicts, and you have to go behind this person because they've got the sword, which is the symbol, the badge of office. Okay. And what Fortis and Huxton are doing, they're going to have to go to each one too and dispel this. And it's like 5 different humorous situations where they keep showing up at these different villages, which are all succumbing to these like chosen one narratives until they can finally get their hands on the being. So each little one is like the being introducing the Sword and the Stone, for example. Fortis and Huxton then arrive, and they've got to dispel this belief that everything else has to stop, and you've got to obey this one person because they have the badge of office. Like, this is your leader. Everything else falls into place. That's nonsense. It's well, everyone's individual opinions kind of have to be dealt with and resolved so they can all move forward. So the core problem is the fact that the sword is the symbol of power, and a focal point for leadership. But Fortis and Huston has to get the villagers to realise that nothing's been resolved. Like in the Sword and the Stone narrative, you got all these different people who are vying for the crown of Great Britain. There's this idea that they want to fight each other, but thankfully this one person pulls the sword from the stone, and they have been given almost divine right to rule. Everyone can calm down and get with King Arthur, and that's great. I like reading that, but it's not going to work for us now, is it? In this day and age, it's Fortis Huxton tried to dispel it, and I'm going to do that in hilarious sorts of ways, which I haven't planned out yet. I'll get there. But well, one way the Sword and Stone could be funny. How do you make it? How do you make that situation? Oh, they like produce loads of swords. So they like the being is there pushing this narrative, and so they just produce loads of swords and start distributing. They copy the being who's trying to create this chosen one, and it just makes the whole thing into a farce. Now the prophecy sort of way of doing things is the magical bit. If you have a prophecy, oh, this could be a little bit of time. No, I don't want time travel. Either way, the being kind of reveals a prophecy to a village about the chosen savior. Actually, this one and the birthmark one kind of are together. Actually, they tell the villagers to look for the signs, and they find their chosen one. And now the core problem with the prophecy chosen one is that the future is like it's a useless way of determining the future. Like almost anyone could match the prophecy if they did certain behaviors. And also like prophecy isn't really about telling you the future. It's telling you what the future is going to be regardless of what you do. No, that's wrong. No, wait. It's a warn. No, a prophecy is always a warning, not really a prediction of the future. That's why it's kind of vague. Like a prophecy could fit anything in the future, but it's also a warning. Like you will definitely get this future if you continue to behave like this. So Fortis and Huxton are going to have to dispel this particular one by pointing it. Like they point out. It's so vague. I know it could lead to this hilarious situation where the chosen one is brought forth. Fortis and Huxton bring out 3 more, and they let it descend into this whole farce of like the whole village arguing about it, and eventually they get the village on track to realizing that even the entire crowd fits the prophecy to some degree or another, and they tell them that it's simply a warning not to behave this way because that's what brings about the apocalypse, but also therefore brings about Bob. So therefore, don't do this. Bob ceases to be a problem. And then there's the I'm going to skip to the the otherworldly force chooses the hero. So this is kind of like how in this is kind of it's not mocking it because I don't want to, but it's how like in religions the person is chosen by the divine person 1-to-1. There's no sword middleman, there's no prophecy middleman. It's just this is the person, listen to him, and everyone agrees. So I think this would actually be the 4th one. That will be the 3rd one, 2nd, and like 1st. Should be the order because I think this should be the last one because the deity is like messing up all the other times, so he just goes for the straight, does it straight and into their face. So they choose another word. So this is about how chosen ones are come from the deity who chooses them and makes it clear they're the one. And the problem with this is that it kind of like, are you sure they know what they're doing? Are you sure? And like, why this guy? And there's like so much more information. We need more info. And this will be funny because it will be like a cloud and the person in the middle of it receiving that, and then there's Fortis and Huxton right here having an argument, and this like supreme being kind of character, he's not actually not divine, so he can't actually hold his own in banter with Fortis and Huxton. So that will be a dialogue. Going for real dialogue humor here. Oops. Now lineage 1, no, not lineage. Yeah, lineage 1. Sorry. So you have a long line of heroes and legends, so therefore the most recent one must be the chosen one. And maybe they're not good at it, so they need a montage of training. Maybe they're not very charismatic or not very confident, so they need to have that build up, and then they find that inner strength, right? But there is a problem with that too. For one thing, it's the expectation that they might not have. So the next in line really isn't suitable, and that's where the humor will be. And like, no montage helps. Okay, and that's what I'm going with. Right. I'm sorry. I know it's been a while since I've done this. I'm gonna have to do another one where I flesh this out, but I've gone over the time I'm trying to aim for, so I'll be back with fleshing each one of these. Oh dear, that's terrible. I'm going to flesh each one of these out and the humor a bit more in the next one. Okay. Oh dear. This one is going to be the most difficult because it's not just telling one genre of storytelling. It's the genre of the fantasy on top of the humor and making it all bind together in a way that works. But I'm looking forward to doing it. This is the one that I think was going to be fun because it's so fun to play with things that are humor. It makes me, the writer, feel good about what I'm writing, and people love reading comedy. Like, especially if it hits just right, and none of the jokes seem like awkward or terrible, but they land, and that's what I need to go for. And hopefully I can show you how to do that when I start writing it out live. But either way, the next one, some more humour, break this down a little bit more, and then come back for the romance one, and then the final fantasy. The final fantasy part of the story. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. And sorry again that it's been so long. I will get better at this, I promise you. It's just I had to try and think this through so much before I could even have notes that I can put down in front of you. I need to go away and think about it again in order I can have even more detailed notes that will help me write chapters, then paragraphs, then lines. So we'll see. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and keep on writing, and good luck with your